So it's 2026, and if you're still paying rent without Bilt, it's time for a change. Bilt is the loyalty program for renters that rewards you for your biggest monthly expense, rent. With Bilt, every rent payment earns you points that can be used toward flights, hotels, Lyft rides, Amazon.com purchases, and so much more. And here's something I'm really excited about. Starting in February, Bilt members can earn points on mortgage payments for the first time. Soon, you're going to be able to get rewarded wherever you live and unlock exclusive benefits with more than 45,000 restaurants, fitness studios, pharmacies, and other neighborhood partners. Personally, I'm going to redeem my points for all of the fitness studio classes that my daughter and I love to take. SoulCycle, Berries, Pure Barre, Core Power. It's simple. Paying rent is better with Bilt. And soon, owning a home will be better with Bilt too. Earn rewards and get something back wherever you live. Join the loyalty program for renters at joinbilt.com/KateCasey. That's JOINBILT.com/KateCasey. Make sure to use our URL so they know that we sent you.
The amazing Kate Casey.
Welcome back for another episode of Reality Life with Kate Casey. Happy New Year, happy 2026. I hope that I'm finding you guys well rested. Hopefully that you spent the New Year's Eve holiday and New Year's Day with your friends and family. And I promise I'm going to keep bringing you some fantastic episodes, some great stories your way this year. So I hope that you are subscribed not only to this podcast, but to the What to Watch list at katecasey.substack.com. This week, I've had some great stories. For example, Tuesday's episode is about the cult of the Real Housewife. This is on TLC. It's a 3-part doc series. So 3 hours worth of investigating the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City star Mary Cosby and the controversial church that she shares with her husband, Robert Cosby Sr. It's called Faith Temple Pentecostal Church. So this series traces the church's rise under her grandmother. Her name was Rosemary Mama Cosby. Everybody called her Mama. And then also through its contested transfer of power and Mary's marriage to Robert. The series unpacks allegations of spiritual but also financial misconduct. So you have ex-congregants speaking publicly for the very first time, but also family members, investigative journalists, and a leading cult expert. And it is exposing a disturbing playbook of control and loyalty. So if you're a Real Housewives fan, I think it fills in a lot of holes for Mary's backstory, but it also opens new ones. So I think they do a pretty good job of just giving you several different angles to the story, and it's really up to you to kind of figure out what you think. I have a lot to think about this series and what has happened, and I think it actually shifted my perspective a bit. And you can listen more in the bonus podcast about that. And then in Wednesday's episode, I had the top 10 true crime documentaries and series of 2025. If you like true crime, you're going to absolutely love that episode and want to share it. And then tomorrow, I'm going to have Rosalind from Members Only Palm Beach on the show. This is a Netflix series. It's about a group of women, seemingly most Philadelphia transplants, trying to work their way through the social scene in Palm Beach, Florida. There's a lot to unpack in that one too. So make sure you listen to those and look out for that episode tomorrow. Now, today I want to tell you about a Netflix doc. It is called Evil Influencer, the JODI HILDEBRANDT story. It is directed by Skye Borgman. Again, it's on Netflix. Skye Borgman has done a ton of docs that I've covered. So if you go back into the archives, you will find she's been a guest several times to talk about her different projects. I think she's probably one of the top 2 documentary directors that Netflix works with. So in this one, it's going to investigate the story of JODI HILDEBRANDT. But before we get there, let's note Ruby Franke. Now, Ruby is a former YouTube family vlogger who rose to prominence in the 2010s as the creator of this channel called 8 Passengers. Why that's significant is for many of us, maybe we watch reality shows or series, but our kids totally got sucked into a lot of these YouTube family channels. I know for myself, my kids used to beg me to have a YouTube show, and I've joked that I lied to them for many years and said we did, and I would take videos and then never post them. The families in the early days who did this a lot of them were actually based in Utah, because I think the culture is very much about memory keeping, and exposing the dynamics of what a lot of people would feel it was pretty mundane. Like, I know I would say to my kids, nobody really cares about what it's like for you guys when you get up to go to school because everybody does that. But there's something that's very majestic, I think, about all of those early videos because it's in this specific pocket of the world with like beautiful mountains and everyone in the family kind of looks alike. And there's some monotony to it, but it's also, I think, maybe calming for a lot of people. They see these large families and they've got a process and there's a ritual to doing a video every day. And a lot of kids got sucked into it. And then surprisingly, you'd find out a lot of adults would follow these families. So Ruby Franke kind of stood out from the beginning. And at the peak of it, they had more than 2.5 million subscribers and documented the daily lives of not only Ruby and her husband Kevin, but the 6 children. So the content followed a familiar and I would say extremely popular format as mentioned. It was family routines, parenting advice, discipline, religious values, and the ups and downs of raising kids. Ruby had presented herself as this strict but principled mother, somebody that believed deeply in structure, obedience, and accountability. She often spoke about parenting through a moral lens, and I'm sure that there were a lot of people that probably related to that. It emphasized responsibility, consequences, and what she framed as character-building discipline. And I think a lot of people were probably sucked into it too because they would think, how do you have 6 kids and be so disciplined about everything? So kind of in the way that we all watch reality shows about people that live completely dissimilar lives, like what are the mechanics to a process in which is completely different than maybe my own family? So even during the channel's height, Ruby's parenting choices were beginning to draw some criticism because viewers were raising concerns about punishments that felt excessive or emotionally harsh. Things like withholding food, publicly shaming her children, or imposing severe consequences for what a lot of people would say are relatively minor infractions. So you're seeing these adorable children and you're seeing there's these really basic processes as far as the way the family runs things. And then if you see over time, they're becoming more and more rigid. People who had been used to watching the show notice these differences and are probably passing it on to other people. Or they're in the comments section, have you guys noticed this? I would assume that Ruby tried as best as she could to erase a lot of them. But once you start to pay attention in the comments section that other people are picking up on something, it begins to create some conversations. So this is kind of in the early 2010s. So you didn't have Reddit or TikTok where people could make videos, but I think it's the comment section people kind of started to notice it mostly. So again, the viewers are raising some concerns and then they become louder and more persistent. And in 2020, controversy intensified when Ruby's teenage son said he had been forced to sleep on a beanbag for months as punishment. Again, if you know teenagers and you're thinking about what could someone possibly do to deserve to have to sleep on a beanbag for months, the backlash was swift and the channel eventually went dark. And behind the scenes, Ruby's personal life was also unraveling. And I think you can also notice once somebody becomes even more rigid about things, it's usually because there's something else going on in their life. So her marriage to Kevin was under strain, and it was during this period that Ruby becomes deeply involved with JODI HILDEBRANDT, a licensed therapist turned life coach and the founder of this organization called Connections. CONNEXIONS. Already a problem for me. I hate it when people botch a simple word like that. So what begins as counseling turns into mentorship, and then I think something more intense. So there are a lot of projects out there about Ruby Franke, and honestly, I understand it because she's this bright, shiny object. She's the influencer. I think we were all really fascinated by influencer culture, especially the YouTube moms, because they project this image of perfection. And I think for many people that it maybe made them feel bad about themselves. Like she's got these 6 kids and they seem to be doing things in line and they all seem to be like this cohesive family. But over time, it's kind of like the person that posts their perfect marriage pictures. They're always kissing and stuff. And you're like, okay, actually, is this real? And then when you see that there's a crack, then it becomes a crater. So the woman whose life was already public long before the arrests, long before the headlines, long before we knew what was happening behind closed doors, Ruby. It's easy to focus on her. She's the visible one, she's familiar, she's clickable. But as Skye Borgman, the director herself, has said, there are other projects out there that really focus on Ruby, and it's pretty easy to do that. But Jodi kind of disappears when she's put next to Ruby. That disappearance, that imbalance is where the story really begins. Because when Skye started pulling on the threads, it became clear that Ruby wasn't the origin point of what had happened. She was instead, perhaps, the accelerant.
It's a new year and time to get back to feeling like yourself. If losing weight is one of your 2026 goals and you're ready to make progress you can count on, then Weight Loss by Hers might be the right fit for you. Through Hers, you're connected with a medical provider who determines if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment plan is personalized to support you in reaching your goals. Plus, you can access a range of treatment options, like oral medication kits or GLP-1 injectables. Hers goes beyond medication by offering access to ongoing care, dosage, and medication adjustments, lifestyle and nutrition tips, and 24/7 support with no hidden cost or membership fees. And with options starting at just $69 per month with a 10-month plan when paid upfront and full, Hers provides access to options that fit your goals and your budget. Feel like your best self again. Visit forhers.com/Kate Casey to get a personalized, affordable plan that gets you. That's forhers.com/Kate Casey. Forhers.com/Kate Casey. Weight Loss by Hers is not available everywhere. Compounded drug products are not approved or evaluated for safety, effectiveness, or quality by the FDA. Prescription required. See website for full details, important safety information, and restrictions. Actual price depends on product and plan purchased. The new year brings advice from every corner. Your feed, your group chat, even your barista. Everybody thinks they're a therapist. But here's the thing, advice isn't therapy. Grow Therapy connects you to licensed professionals who actually get you. Therapy is too expensive used to be the end of the conversation. But what if it didn't have to be? With Grow Therapy, care is designed to be affordable, insurance-friendly, and easy to understand. No subscriptions, just support that fits your life and your budget. Whether it's your first time in therapy or your 50th, Grow makes it easier to find a therapist who fits you, not the other way around. And they connect you with thousands of independent licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. And you can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. And if something comes up, you can cancel up to 24 hours in advance at no cost. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session, and Grow helps you find therapy on your time. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/Kate Casey today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/Kate Casey. growtherapy.com/Kate Casey. Availability and coverage can vary state by state and insurance plan.
It really was when Ruby met Jodi that things got more extreme. Jodi really is the kind of ringleader of this. So once you start looking at Jodi, not just as Ruby's collaborator, not just as her co-defendant, but as a person with her own long history, what emerges is not just chaos, it's pattern. Now, to give you some further context, Jodi was one of 7 children, raised in a devout Mormon family. She spent her childhood in Arizona, so she's singing, playing sports, thriving in structured environments that rewarded discipline and obedience and performance. She was a high school basketball standout, leading her team to an undefeated state championship. So she learns early how to excel inside systems that value hierarchy and rules. Later, in one of her self-published books, she wrote about being a victim of sexual abuse as a child. And that detail matters. It's not just a justification, not as an explanation, but as part of how she later positioned herself as someone who had suffered, someone who had insight, and someone who understood pain and therefore claimed authority over it. So by early adulthood, she's living in Utah, attending Utah Valley Community College, and setting her sights on a future that was built on legitimacy and trust. Again, very much a big pillar of the faith in which she was raised. She earns a bachelor's degree in English language and literature from Brigham Young University in 1996. And then she went on to earn a master's degree in educational psychology from the University of Utah in 2003. And in July of 2005, JODI becomes a licensed clinical mental health counselor. And that credential matters because a license doesn't just confer training, it confers credibility. It tells people, you can trust me, I'm bound by rules, I'm accountable, I have put in the hours that's required to get the license. In 2007, she launches her counseling practice, the previously mentioned Connections. So you have it all branded. It's aspirational, moral. The program promised to help people live in truth. That's a big deal with her. A lot of her language is about truth, 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 connection, and freedom. Now, I think it's important to point out that the Church of Latter-day Saints, the faith in which she was raised, there wasn't at that time a lot of interest in therapy. And so I think that when she really begins this program, I think it was probably really exciting for people to feel like there is an opportunity for self-growth, and really all faiths can benefit from self-growth. So I think that there were many well-meaning people that went to her because it was an opportunity to have conversations and to try to better yourself in an environment with somebody who is well-educated in psychology and also seems to have a similar background, which I think probably would be very comforting. So when you think about her continuously saying truth, not your truth, not complexity, not nuance, just truth, that would be pretty enticing for people. Well, former clients will later describe a program that felt less like therapy and more like ideological conditioning. They describe language that shifted slowly but decisively. Family members labeled as unsafe, relationships reframed as obstacles to righteousness. So you have well-meaning people who are seeking the help from somebody who seems to be very experienced, knowledgeable, has done many, many hours of work. And it's just the slight little language changes, the ideological conditioning that happens. It's like a slow burn. Again, you're labeling relatives as unsafe. And the reframing of relationships too, and putting it as obstacles to righteousness, that's where you kind of go off the rails. And there was an early warning sign. In 2012, Utah's Division of Professional Licensing placed JODI's counseling license on probation for unprofessional conduct after she had disclosed a patient's confidential information. So that probation lasted from late January 2012 to early August 2013. That professional history and the way she later repositioned herself as a family mentor rather than a therapist is essential context for viewers coming to this case through Netflix. So again, reposition yourself as a family mentor rather than a therapist, because if you're a family mentor, I feel like you're skating outside the lane. Maybe you're not under the same professional obligations if you're considered a quote-unquote mentor. After that probation, JODI didn't disappear. She just pivoted. She leaned away from traditional therapy and fully into life coaching. Now, life coaching is a very murky area. It does not require the same requirements as somebody who is a professional mental health expert. Connections Classroom became her primary vehicle, and it gained traction, especially among members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. People turn to her for help with their marriages, with parenting, with obedience, with moral clarity. And here's one of the great contradictions of this story. Despite being divorced herself with 2 estranged children, and by the way, doesn't it always go this way, right? The person who's giving you all of the information on how you can be a better version of yourself, again, with the righteousness, is divorced and has 2 estranged children. She's giving you advice on how you can be better in your own marriage, and you can be a better parent, and you can have obedience and moral clarity, but is no longer married and has 2 estranged children. She's increasingly positioned as an authority on family unity and righteousness. People didn't just listen, they deferred. One of the families who trusted her was the Frankies. So in 2019, JODI begins counseling Chad Frankie, who's the second oldest child of Ruby and Kevin. Now, if we were to look at the story of the Frankie children, and I've read Sherry Frankie's book, I would tell you that these children are just really just normal kind of kids. And Chad just wants some freedom, just like every teenager. He wants to be fully himself. And he's in a house that is so controlling that sometimes you have somebody who's pushing even harder on the boundaries. And he's a sweet kid, and he's getting unbelievable punishment. Like I just mentioned, the beanbag, he had to sleep on it for weeks. So the Frankies go to Jodi because they're like, we have this kid. He doesn't listen. Now, is he really that bad of a kid? No. Are they struggling in their marriage? Yeah. I mean, I think that they got married young. They have all of these children. She's got increasingly more disciplined with them because she's got some real serious issues. And I think the husband is just a pushover and just kind of lets her do whatever. And I've always kind of questioned their emotional chemistry, let alone their physical chemistry. So they've got 6 kids, and they're already culturally conditioned to respect authority that presented itself as moral and spiritual truth. They're in a constant journey to have some moral and spiritual truth. And it didn't stop with Chad. Jodi becomes Ruby's mentor. Then she becomes her collaborator. Then she becomes her business partner. And then eventually she becomes her roommate. Again, skirting outside the lanes when you're no longer the therapist, but you're the mentor. And that's where the story takes a turn that's difficult to overstate. By 2021, Jodi tells the Frankies that she was being tormented by what she described as shadow figures, and she moves into their home for support. Not long after, Ruby asks Kevin for what she calls an in-home separation. He was no longer allowed upstairs. So I want you to let that settle for a second. Jodi, who was once her therapist, then her mentor, then her business partner, says to this couple, in which have been her clients, that she's being tormented by what she describes as shadow figures, although she is positioning herself as an expert on moral and emotional clarity. So she has asked this couple, who again were her clients, to move into their home so that they can support her. And not long after, Ruby says to her husband, I think we need an in-home separation. And by that means he cannot enter the upstairs of the home in which he co-owns with her. So Jodi is now living inside the Frankie family private world, physically, emotionally, spiritually. These children who have been under conditions in which they are being completely controlled with parents that have no connection. And now the therapist, who's now their mother's mentor, is now living inside their home. They have no way of escaping. So according to Kevin Frankie, Ruby and Jodi eventually slept in the same bed. He said the two women experienced spiritual visions together while sharing a bedroom. And now Sherry in her book says that one night there was just this weird experience where her mom was going upstairs to be in the room, and she could just feel that it was probably going to be something along the lines of probably intimate. So lots of boundaries are being crossed here. This isn't just influence anymore. This was like fusion. Jodi is living in the home until early 2022. And then in 2023, Ruby and her 2 youngest children moved into Jodi's home in Ivins, Utah. So now they're in Jodi's home, and it's the 2 youngest kids, as Ruby's separation from Kevin continues. And what happened next is part of what Skye, the director, admits she has never encountered before. In December of 2023, Jodi pleads guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. Remember, authorities show up to her house. There is a child that has escaped. He is clearly been malnourished and also abused. And that brings the authorities to Jodi's house. They find a girl in a room by herself in the middle of the room. She's extremely thin. You can tell that she has been in the darkness for a while. And Ruby's not there, but Jodi's there. And that is when it kicks off this full investigation. So it's December of 2023 when Jodi pleads guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. The plea agreement lays out exactly things that are really hard to hear. She forced 2 of the kids, ages 9 and 11, to perform physical outdoor labor. She left them outside for hours in extreme heat. In one particular cruel instance, she made the young girl repeatedly jump on a cactus. She denied them food and water, improperly treated their injuries. She told them that it was all very necessary because they were evil and they needed to repent. So it makes you wonder if Chad or the sister had not been found that day, would they have ever escaped? And what makes this documentary different is it doesn't end with the arrest, because once Jodi is taken into custody, something else happens. Former Connections clients then begin to come forward. Men describe being diagnosed by Jodi with addictions to sex or pornography, issues they said they did not experience before seeing her. She was encouraging spouses to separate over those diagnoses. And there's one former patient who, I believe she told 2020 that Jodi routinely instructed women to basically kick their husbands out of the house if they ever look at porn. So it's not really about therapy at that point, it's about control. And suddenly what looked like an isolated family breakdown begins to resemble a system. In January of 2025, another client comes forward, files a federal lawsuit against Jodi, Ruby, and Connections. That suit alleges that Connections sold fraudulent services, leadership training, and personal development programs costing thousands of dollars. More disturbingly, the lawsuit claims that Connections encouraged clients to participate in child abuse. This person that came forward said that their daughter suffered sunburns, injuries, and dehydration while in the care of his ex-wife, a devoted follower of Jodi, who is also named in the suit. They're seeking millions in damages and an injunction to keep Connections from operating at all. Ruby's husband has also pursued legal action, her ex-husband, I should say. In January of 2024, he filed for restitution, seeking to hold Jodi financially responsible for the extensive treatment his children will need. In April, he sued for her negligence and intentional emotional harm. And in August of 2025, Kevin filed yet another lawsuit, this one alleging that Jodi misrepresented herself as a psychologist while serving as his mental health counselor. I think that this is the wider frame that Sky does a great job in presenting to us in this documentary. This is just not just a crime, but a system. This is manipulation. And unfortunately, I do think that their faith played a role, because one of the main contributing factors is that they were both involved in high demand religion. So you're taught to listen to people above you and to toe the line. So there are so many questions about demanding obedience as morality, telling people that that suffering is growth. And it's not just this case. I think that's something that we've heard a lot. I mean, we hear that in the Nexium case too, is people suffering and that somehow that's supposed to allow you to grow, which is lunacy. That isolation is healing, it never is. That pain is proof of righteousness, which is absurd. So in February of 2024, Jodi was sentenced to an indeterminate term of 4 to 30 years. Now, she's incarcerated at the Utah State Correctional Facility in the general women's population known as DEL. That's the same unit where Ruby is housed, but they're separated, one on the high side and one on the low side. In March of 2025, Jodi filed a last-ditch attempt to withdraw her guilty plea, claiming she didn't understand her rights. Her first parole hearing is scheduled for December of 2026. Now, at that hearing, the board could set a release date or schedule another review or decide she's going to serve those full 30 years, placing her release as late as August of 2053. So I think what's important about this doc is that Jodi is such a big part of this story, and that there's the spiderweb effect. There are all of these other people that were affected. And I think that Ruby is so often the one that people focus on. But I think Jodi's story represents when people get power, abuse power, how authority metastasizes, how credibility becomes camouflage, how belief systems normalize harm long before anybody calls it abuse. And I think the most dangerous people in these stories aren't always the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who sound the calmest, the ones who promise things like truth, the ones who insist that they know it's best. And at the time, you don't realize what's happening, but you're kind of trapped inside of it. And I find it fascinating how people can escape from it. And in this case, it's 2 children that were able to escape. And again, I wonder what would have happened if they had never been seen by those officers that day. How much worse would it have gotten? So I'm recommending it to you. I hope that you watch it. I really have great respect for Skye Borgman, the director. I think she does great work. And I think it's a really good conversation starter. A lot of you, again, like true crime stuff, but the psychology behind a lot of these stories. So it's called Evil Influencer, the Jodi Hildebrandt story. It is on Netflix and it is streaming now. As always, I want to make sure that you're in that Facebook group, Reality Life with Kate Casey. I would really love to know what you guys think about this case. And also check out my What to Watch list at katecasey.substack.com. Please check out the bonus episodes on Apple Podcast. I've got a fun limited series with Mary Payne called Tell Me Everything, which you can find on Patreon. And of course, follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram at @KCCA, TikTok, it's KKC, and Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky at @KKC. Check back tomorrow for an all-new episode.